Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Andrei Shevchenko. On behalf of the Mediacentre Ukraine, I welcome all the reporters who are telling the world about our fight for freedom. Today, Ukraine commemorates a very sad day. It's the commemoration of the barbaric deportation of the Crimean Tatars. The campaign was organized by Joseph Stalin in 1944. We'll talk about this with Alim Aliev, the co-founder of the Crimea-SOS Foundation and Deputy Executive Director of the Ukrainian Institute. Hello. I hope you can hear me. So, what is the current mood for Crimean Tatars? Today is the Crimean Tatar Deportation Day, and this is the date which Crimean Tatars commemorated throughout all the years after the return to their homeland. Because during the deportation, almost half of all the Crimean Tatar people perished. And today, this date is not just a day of remembrance of our ancestors, but also we have to remember that genocides is something Russia has been doing systematically since 18th century. It's just the systemic policy of the Russian Empire. And by Russian Empire, I mean both the Soviet Union and today's Putin's regime. It's the policy against three nations. And we see that the genocides committed by Russia in the territory of Ukraine, unfortunately, we have just another confirmation of that. After the occupation of Crimea by the Russian Federation in 2014, the Crimean Tatars were targets of the oppressions by the occupational government. We know that Majlis of the Crimean Tatar nation has been banned. We know that there were personal repressions over Crimean Tatar activists. Why is this Crimean Tatar fact so important for the occupational authorities? It's easy. Crimea, since 2014, is essentially a neo-colony of Russia. So when we are talking about the violations of human rights, it's just the top of the iceberg. There are at least four elements of changes in the peninsula. Firstly, the peninsula gets militarized. For 8 years, we've been saying that Russia is arming Crimea to its maximum possible extent. We now see rockets flying from Crimea to other parts of Ukraine because they are using Crimea as the bridgehead, and also they militarize the minds of people since kindergarten. The next factor is the oppression of free media and the ruination of our national institutions, such as Majlis, the National Assembly of the Crimean Tatar nation. Next, we have the brain drain. Over 50,000 people leaving Crimea, but instead, Russia has been sending at least 500,000 new population. So they replace the ethnic composition of Crimea, and this is the violation of the international humanitarian law. It's just part of the colonization policies. And the last but not the least is the change in identity. Everything which is not in line with the Russian paradigm must be destroyed. This is what they think. They destroy Crimean Tatar language. They destroy the Crimean Tatar cultural heritage and Ukrainian cultural heritage. So the policies mentioned, well, it started back in the 18th century. when there was the first occupation of Crimea, when they started bringing in Russians to Crimea, and Crimean Tatars who were repressed were forced to leave to the Ottoman Empire. So why do they pay so much attention aggressively to Crimean Tatars? Is it because they see Crimean Tatars as a threat, or this is just lack of tolerance to whatever is not in line with Russian imperial identity? Yes, a threat. Any strong identity, when you have the answer, the question, who are you and why this land is important for you personally, it poses a threat to Russian security system. So this war against Ukraine is also war for identity. And the Russians certainly do not need Crimean Tatars who claim to be at home in their homeland, and who remember their history, and who understand that Crimean Tatars will definitely be living in their land and developing it. The same can be said about all other territories of Ukraine, because Russia wants to see us as a colony, and it's like the phantom pain of the empire. It manifests as war and genocide. What has changed in Crimea after February the 24th? Well, obviously, in the last 8 years, Crimea has been living in fear. However, there are still a lot of free people living in Crimea who organize resistance, who conduct systemic policies to maintain Ukrainian and Crimean Tatar identity. From February the 24th, we have seen a very strong movement by Russia to impress people in Crimea militarily. We also see the increase the in the troops and equipment movement, but also there are these guerrilla movements when blue and yellow colors are used, for example, to paint the doors of the occupational administration in Eupatoria, or in Sevastopol. We see the inscriptions Bucha and Irpin on park benches. We see a Crimean Tatar teacher at school who is scolding a child for having Z on the T-shirt. And well, later she had to quit. She was repressed essentially. So we see these attempts of resistance, and the Crimean residents are telling me that now they are essentially significantly more optimistic regarding the deoccupation than a year before. And today, it's important for us to say that a lot of Crimean Tatars are now in the Ukrainian army, and we appreciate that. A lot of Crimean Tatars are now volunteers who work in the humanitarian front, in the information front. Today, our victory, yeah, today our victory will be part of our joint, our shared victory of all Ukraine, the all Western civilization. The situation in the occupied territories in the south of Ukraine. How is it different from what we've seen in Crimea in 2014? Or let me rephrase it. The situation in Kherson, Berdyansk, Melitopol, is it similar to what Crimea saw in 2014, or is it different? I really have flashbacks when I hear about Kherson in 2022. Flashbacks to Crimea in 2014. The first thing an occupier does when it occupies the territory, it tries to just throw activists and reporters to cellars, or they simply kidnap people. This is what we see now in Kherson Oblast. The TV channels are disconnected. They try to organize fake referendums, and they fail. And it's the resistance of the local population. It's important to tell about this. The resistance in Crimea in 2014, and there are also fantastic attempts to show resistance, to show popular protests in 2022. What is different also is that in Kherson, um, they came in from another occupied territory, and they already had Russian flags. In Crimea, first they came in as these little green men without any insignia. So now the story of the occupation, it's the story of destroyed lives and destroyed institutions. So, what are the grounds for the optimism um, to make sure that 2014's events will not be scaled up in other areas? Well, now uh, Putin's Russia is going all in, and they will fail. I don't see a different future for Russia. It can only collapse. So today it's important for us to stay strong, to hold our ground, and to try as much as possible to kick back the occupiers from our land. We also are optimistic because the whole world now sees that Russia is, well, it's new Nazism. This is the history which happened into the 20th century, and nobody could think that it can uh, also be quite real in the 21st century. So this support matters. Also, we must say that, well, what's victory for us? The return of the Ukrainian flag to Crimea would be a victory, because our war started with that peninsula. And after Crimea, we saw the takedown of MH17. We saw war in Syria. We saw the intervention in the elections in other countries. We saw these total smearing propaganda campaign. All these efforts by Russia, well, this cycle should be stopped, and it should be stopped with the liberation of Crimea. Thank you. Alim Aliev, the co-founder of the Crimea-SOS Foundation and Deputy Executive Director of the Ukrainian Institute, spoke about the commemoration of the Crimean Tatar deportation, the situation in Crimea, and about our hope that in the new circumstances we will have a real chance to liberate Crimea. Thank you, Alim. Our next briefing will start at 11:30. We are looking forward to Mr.